In the last hour, Democrats in Congress have formally introduced an article of impeachment against President Trump, charging him with incitement of insurrection for his role in the events leading up to the storming of the US Capitol building 5 days ago. It's just 9 days until the inauguration of Joe Biden as president. Democrats have also put forward a resolution demanding that the Vice-President Mike Pence and the rest of the cabinet strip Donald Trump of his presidential powers.
Well, Republicans have blocked the request for now, but it could be voted on as early as Tuesday. If that fails, Democrats have warned they'll move to impeach the president for a second time. President Trump has been accused of inciting his supporters to attack Congress last Wednesday to try to overturn Joe Biden's election victory back in November.
Well, let's speak now to Gary O'Donoghue, who is on Capitol Hill for us. And Gary, Democrats have released this article of impeachment against President Trump. What exactly are they accusing him of?
Well, just to be clear, I'm in downtown Washington, not on the Hill. But what they're saying is that the president is responsible for inciting insurrection, that his words, his actions, particularly last week ahead of that attack on the Capitol were an attempt really at a coup, and that's what they're planning to vote on, possibly as early as Wednesday, Laura. That article of impeachment could be voted on, depending what happens with this other resolution on the 25th Amendment. And then there'll be a question, because the Democrats obviously do have the majority, they have the numbers in the House to get an article through by a simple majority. Then there'll be the question about when and how they sent that article of impeachment to the Senate.
And there's some talk, isn't there, Gary, that it could potentially be that Democrats wait until after Joe Biden's first 100 days as president before they send those articles of impeachment to the Senate. So is there a split among Democrats about how to proceed here?
I think there's a potential split here because the Senate is obliged to take up these articles as soon as they receive them and move to a trial. And of course, that first 100 days, now that the Biden administration has some semblance of control of the Senate with the 50-50 split and the casting vote of the vice president, they'll want to use those first 100 days to their full effect, not least to get his cabinet and his other picks confirmed for the executive branch, but also to begin the process of legislation. So they won't want to, in a sense, waste it, if you like, if I can put it that way, on a long and drawn-out trial. They could delay that trial for months, Laura. What will be the point of it? Well, of course, it wouldn't remove the president from office because he'll have already been long gone. But it would be, if they can get the Republicans to support it, a conviction. And that's quite important in itself, but also it would prevent Donald Trump from standing for federal office in future and rule out any possibility of that fabled 2024 run.
Gary, is there really any Republican support for impeaching the president?
Democrats certainly hope that there will be. There have been one or two rumblings. One or two Republicans in the House have indicated they might be open to it. That we've seen a few senators, 2 or 3 senators, who have called on President Trump to resign. Would they then go along with an impeachment idea? You'll remember, of course, Mitt Romney, in the last impeachment trial that Donald Trump faced, did vote for one of those articles of impeachment. So there's a history of one Republican in the Senate, for example, supporting at least one article of impeachment. Democrats would love it to be, to some extent, bipartisan, because in the House last time around, they got not one single Republican vote.
Gary O'Donoghue, thank you.
Well, let's continue to analyse events. Let's turn to the security side of it. Let's speak to Corey Sharkey, who's the Director of Foreign and Defence Policy at the American Enterprise Institute. Thank you so much for being here on the programme. Your take at those developments in the last hour or so on the floor of the House, the various options put forward, what we're likely to see in the coming days. Give me your assessment.
My assessment is that it's unlikely the president will resign. It's unlikely that the invocation of the 25th Amendment will happen. It's extremely likely that the House of Representatives will vote to impeach the president. So in order to hold President Trump accountable. And then I think, as your correspondent said, there will be a decision about when to hold the Senate trial. And my guess is they'll probably let the trial slip until after they have they've held hearings and confirmed President-elect Biden's cabinet.
And Corey, as we see more and more images, more and more footage of that storming of the US Capitol building, and I was there outside and it was shocking enough from the outside, what is your sense of how organised this may have been?
Much more organized than I think we initially thought. You can see in some video lines of men in military gear moving into the Capitol. The fact that they had zip ties to take hostages, I think, is extraordinarily worrisome. While a lot of the mob appeared to be, having fun, thinking this was great, and several of the people who've been identified as being in the Capitol are acting like they're, they were just caught in the wrong moment. And that's clearly not true. People made choices. They bought airplane and bus tickets. They elected to break windows and threaten members of Congress. I mean, I think we shouldn't be at all hesitant to call this what it was. The President of the United States inciting a mob to violence to threaten members of Congress in an effort to prevent them from announcing the electoral outcome. It's shocking. This hasn't happened in the United States in 153 years. And the president and the people around him who have been encouraging this escalation of violence by falsely claiming the election was not decided in favor of President-elect Biden, there's an accountability coming for all of them, as you see, as the FBI begins to make arrests.
You talk about, Corey, the accountability for all those involved, and we've seen a number of arrests being actually carried out on camera. Does the accountability, do you think, extend to all those senior Republicans who were there on the floor of the chamber on Wednesday, prepared to push back, to object against Joe Biden's victory? Does it extend to them? Does it extend to that female Congresswoman who live tweeted the whereabouts of Nancy Pelosi as the crowd were entering?
In my judgment, it should. And it looks like a number of members of Congress, like Senator Cruz from Texas and Senator Hawley, who not only were denying the electoral outcome, but Senator Hawley's caught on film encouraging the mob outside the Capitol. They were threatening the Congress, and they should be held accountable. I think it would be advantageous for the Senate to censor both of them and for the House to take action against people who whipped up this mob.
Corey Sharkey, thank you so much for joining us there.
Well, those events moving apace and are likely to move even faster over both Tuesday and Wednesday. But today's development already, that article of impeachment being laid. I was talking only a short while ago here on BBC News to Richard Benveniste, who was the special prosecutor during the Watergate scandal. He talked to me just a short while ago and gave me his assessment of those events last Wednesday.
We're in a constitutional crisis caused by the President of the United States, who is unhinged, who is so far removed from his constitutional responsibilities that they are seriously considering the invocation of the 25th Amendment, which is designed to remove a president who is unable to comport with the responsibilities of his high office. So that would require the vice president to initiate and a vote of a majority of the existing cabinet, who would then send their determination of the president's unfitness to the Congress. There would need to be a vote in the Congress of 2/3 of each body in order to install the vice president in place of the president until such time as the president could recover his faculties sufficient to perform his functions. And of course, all of that is unlikely to happen.
And we'll see what plays out. Just give me your assessment. Was it worse, what we saw on Wednesday, than Watergate?
It was infinitely worse than Watergate, and it has been for quite some time. This president has no regard for his constitutional responsibilities. He tramples the Constitution on almost a daily basis. He is either ignorant or malevolent, and perhaps a combination of both of those.
And yet in the past we've seen him boast famously that he could get away with almost anything.
Well, we'll see. This is another existential moment for Donald Trump. Perhaps he will escape without being removed by the 25th Amendment. Certainly he will not be impeached and convicted within the time remaining for the transition of power to the new president, Joseph Biden. So it appears to me that Congress is so enraged by the fact that his mob, his followers, incited by him, came to the Capitol in order to interrupt the constitutional process necessary for the succession of a new president.
And you're in no doubt of the culpability, are you, of Donald Trump? Chris Christie, one of the president's former allies, said only over the weekend, if insurrection is not impeachable, then nothing is. I assume from what you're saying that you share that assessment.
It's quite clear that it's impeachable. However, within the time that's remaining, it is unlikely that he would be removed by impeachment. A two-thirds vote of the Senate after a trial would be required. There are not enough days left in the calendar before the 20th of January when the transition will take place. However, there is precedent for an individual to be impeached in one term and then convicted after he has left office. That happened in the aftermath of the Lincoln assassination in the administration of President Grant, when the Secretary of War was impeached. He resigned, and then he was tried in the Senate after his resignation, and he was acquitted. There was not a two-thirds vote to convict him. So what's necessary is that President Trump be cabined, that he be prevented from causing further damage to our country. And I think this is all about that.
What do you say to those who say we shouldn't impeach? Only a few days to go. This is about healing the nation, about unity. What do you say to those people after what we've seen both on Wednesday and over the last 4 years?
Well, I think there needs to be a full development of the record, how much Donald Trump was involved in the events at the Capitol. Was he involved in preventing or trying to dissuade the Pentagon from allowing troops to support the overwhelmed Capitol Police? Was he specifically communicating with the rioters? Look, they were not only there to impede the counting of the Electoral College votes, which has always been a formality, but they were also there, at least some of them, to take hostages, to try to capture members of Congress. They were there with restraints, as well as crude arms. So, you know, we're in a situation where we've never seen in this country before, where armed rioters not only attempt to impede the constitutional process, but they're also there to take hostages. It's just incredible. And so there must be accountability for this.